glad you could come. It's a beautiful day and a great day to tour the shop, see the house, see some guitars, play some guitars. That's what we're here for. Come on in. I'm a firm believer in simple tools, and as you'll see, I just have a belt sander, a bandsaw, a drill press, a jointer, and a radial arm saw, and this wonderful little German tool, a little table saw I use for doing very fine work. I actually make my own purflings, and I use this for slicing them up. I also make brace stock on this. And it's got a wonderful little carbide blade. And it's so precise, I can actually cut strips 20 thousandths of an inch thick. Just slice it through and it's perfect. Here's my glue pot. It's not on at the moment, but I usually keep it high glue warm all the time because I do a lot of work with high glue. And then here's the next run of guitars. We got a couple of dreadnoughts and a triple O and a neat Brazilian Rosewood 00 12 fret. And what I do is I work in a 6-week cycle. I usually build 6 guitars at a time, about a guitar a week. And so this is the end of one run and the beginning of the next. So I got basically 6 or 7 guitars, maybe 8 guitars going right now. And as soon as this 00 comes out of this mold, this 00, which has already been bent and prepped, will go back in and I'll do the liners and get the box put together. What I'm doing, this is a vintage style guitar. It's a 28 style, so it's got the bound, this little Ivoroid strip will end up getting bound all the way around all 4 sides and fit it into the space, and then the regular side bindings will pick up the slack. This little tiny operation, normally with just the 2 strips on the side, takes about 6 minutes, but to bind the whole thing off will take me probably an hour to do that one little piece. And these are next. I just put the last coat of finish on this. This is what the box with the case is for. This will be an L00, and the box for that is just going in the finish here. It's got the first coat of coloring. This will be a natural top one. And it'll have a very, very vintage sound. It's built just like the old Gibsons from the 30s. It has what they call the knife-style bracing. I can actually show you that if you'd like. Normal Martin bracing. Let me see if I can find a piece real quick. Yeah. Normal Martin bracing. It's like this. It's sort of parabolic, very smooth and round. The Gibson bracing is knife-style. It's basically triangular. And the original guitars, you see the saw marks? The original guitars have these same saw marks. They didn't clean them up at all. They just cut them out and dropped them on the guitar. And I built them with saw marks and without saw marks. It actually makes a difference. I was shocked. It gives you a little bit more edgy quality to the sound. This brace, because of its mass versus this brace, will give you a much woodier, warmer sound. If you built a Gibson-style guitar with the Martin-style bracing, it won't sound like a Gibson, it'll sound like a Martin. If you build a Martin-style guitar with Gibson-style bracing, it won't sound like a Martin, it'll sound like a Gibson. So the bracing size and shape is really important. And this is a top I had to pull off a guitar, but this is basically what I do. It's sort of a 30s vintage Martin style with the scalloping and the tails and the feet of the X, very small side bracings, finger bracings. And essentially, it's as light as you can go without it coming apart. But when I pick out a top, I'm looking for clarity. Where's a good top? This is actually going on a prairie state, so it's really big. But I'm looking for a good, clean fundamental and a nice quality of the sound. This is an excellent top. This is going on the little 00 that I built. But part of that clarity of the ping is a function of its stiffness. It's quite stiff. But one thing to remember with small guitars, because it's small, it's going to be stiffer overall than a bigger guitar with a wider top. So you have to take that into account when you actually pick out a top. And I have in my stash, this is some Adirondack. Talk about ugly. It's just interesting. A lot of people are using Adirondack these days. But the quality of the Adirondack available today versus 40, 50, 60 years ago is radically different. The modern material isn't quite as stiff or as hard as the old stuff. And it tends to have a very mid-range, strong, not terribly articulate kind of sound. I've got an old Adirondack top here. Let me pop that out and show you the difference. This Adirondack is some of John Arnold's stuff, and he cut this back in the early 90s. He was one of the very first people that cut the Adirondack. But you can see part of this. I mean, look how fine the grain on this is. It's like Engelmann. It has some of these color issues, but it's just a marvelous material. He parts with these very slowly, very sparingly. You have to know John to get the tops. For a small top to have a clean, low fundamental like that, I mean, this guitar will just be so big and powerful and sweet. This is going on a repro of like a late 20s Martin 0042, so it'll have the abalone everywhere. That's all that marking. Oh, and then there's here's the Oshiodi. This is Let's. Now hear how nice and clean that is. I mean, this is an exceptionally good top. And again, it's quite stiff. Part of that clean ping tone is the stiffness. I get my Let's from Shane up in British Columbia, and he generally sends me a stack of tops consecutively cut out of the tree. So once I've built with one guitar, I know how the rest of them are going to be treated. Let's see, let me show you. Want to pull out some top material? Okay. So this is some of the Brazilian rosewood I keep on hand. In fact, I think this one's yours. I'm not sure. I have to look it up. It varies. You can see it varies tremendously in color from the sort of brick red to the almost Indian rosewood-like looking stuff. And then here's some of that wild material, the stumpy stuff. I don't generally use that. I don't like it. I like the more straight grain material like this. And some of the sets are small, which is nice. This will make a wonderful little triple O, or double O. And I really like the bold materials like this, where you get that kind of intense color change. From the really, really dark, it's almost ebony like when it's finished. Actually, I think this is yours. This is for Blue G. The straight grain brick red material is very difficult to find. It's become very hard to get. I'm glad to have a few sets. Most of the Brazilian CD, the dark stuff, is like this today. It's just more wild. Sets like this are extremely rare. This is like the stuff Martin was using back in the 30s. And then Brazilian varies, as I say, varies in color. This will be very, very, very dark with finish on it, but very pretty, very rich. The next great rosewood is Pau Escrito. It doesn't look that great, but it sounds wonderful. And it's a sustainable wood. This is going on a custom guitar for a fellow in Singapore. I really love working with Brazilian. It has the sweetest sort of rose kind of smell to it with the dust. Unlike Honduran smells sort of like horse sweat, and Madagascar has a peppery quality. It's really not much fun to work with. But the Brazilian is just a delight. And the other thing about Brazilian, it surprises me. After all the guitars I've built, I kept thinking, well, Brazilian and Madagascar and Honduran, they're not that different. But they are. And I finally figured out what it is. And Brazilian has an elasticity to it that the other woods don't. It moves more freely than the more dense, stiffer Rosewoods like Honduran and Madagascar. And the sound is quite different. If you play my triple O in Brazilian versus a triple O in Madagascar side by side, you'll hear that the Brazilian is just bigger and more responsive and a more complex sound. That's why I like working with Brazilian. Though it's expensive and hard to get, I do have a good source. In fact, living in Portland is a wonderful asset because my source is in Portland. I can go over to the warehouse and go through stacks and stacks of Brazilian and find good stuff. But it's just, I mean, it's just gorgeous material. Under finish, this will just be striking. I love working with wood like this. I can feel it giving and just sort of sighing, giving into the heat. The waist bend is always done first. It gives me a good feel for how the wood is going to bend and whether I'm going to need strapping. Some woods, like lacewood, are almost impossible to bend. Hold it until it cools off. In the old days at Martin, they used to have a little electric fan sitting right here by the bender, and he'd just cool it off with the fan. But what I'm doing is I'm basically building guitars like Martin and Gibson did back in the teens and 20s. Except I'm doing the work of 12 people instead of just myself. This particular piece of maple is pretty stiff. It's putting up a good fight. Again, the beauty of Brazilian is when it bends, it just bends like butter. It's wonderful to work with. Madagascar, on the other hand, and Honduran are very difficult to bend. What I'm doing is I'm bending it and I'm looking at the mold and following the contours of the mold in my head. I do a lot of that kind of thing. To me, that visual memory is critical to how I do what I do. I can look at a piece and know when it's right. I can look at a chunk of wood and see the piece in it before I start working. It saves a lot of measuring and prep time. I used to drive my apprentices crazy because they'd ask me how thick a piece of something was, and I'd pick it up and say, that's 130 thousandths. And they'd say, no way. And they'd measure it to be 130, 131. But over almost 50 years, you develop a sense of how big and how small things are just by feel. So instead of having to stop and find a measuring device and taking extra time, you just look at it and say, okay, that's right. Don't try and do this at home, kids. What I'm doing is I'm rocking it. I'm heating this center area, but I'm also heating the areas around it. It helps the wood take a more even curve. describe my apprentices. So what I'm doing is I'm basically heat setting it into the mold. And it relaxes the wood. Whoops, burns the wood too if you're not careful. Remind me not to talk into the torch. Then I'll just let it sit and cool off, and then I can pop it out of the mold and trim it and start the fitting up process. The bracing on the guitar is a complement to the top of the guitar. You can actually alter the voice of a particular top by your choice of brace stock and how you treat those braces. For example, if you had a very, very soft top, you know if you just brace it normally, it's going to be very mid-range strong. It's going to be kind of mushy, not very good highs, possibly good lows, but the highs will be missing. So by leaving the top a little thick and arching it more and adding stiff bracing to it, you get those, bring up the brightness, bring up the highs. By contrast, if you had a very stiff top, you just stop as you use a softer bracing and a lighter bracing and let the stiffness of the top take all the structural stuff, and you get the nice balance that way. But you can really tweak the voices of the guitars by the choice of bracing, the size of the mass of the bracing, and how much arching you put in the top. Make a bridge for one of these guitars I'm putting together today. So I basically make 3 styles of bridges other than the custom stuff. This is a Gibson style bridge from the 30s. This goes on the L00. It's very simple, just little ramps and a box. I haven't slotted it for the saddle yet. And this is the standard Martin bridge. They call it the belly bridge. Whoops, I don't have a pyramid bridge here. And it's just, again, very simple. This is what I have to make today. And this thing is called an arrow bridge. This is actually on Stephen Grossman's original Prairie State that Mario at John Lundberg's shop retopped for him. And Mario used one of these bridges. I thought it was really elegant, so I borrowed his ideas to make a repro of his bridge. I only use this on the Prairie State. It's a big bridge. This is almost 7 inches across, so it requires a big guitar to look right. But anyway, making a bridge, again, I do almost everything by hand. There's my bridge. Now I'll go saw it out. Is to sand it. It's kind of messy and noisy, but Try and get the spacing about right. That's about right. And then I cut. And the thing about engraving, if you watch a skilled engraver, regardless of what it is he's doing, he always takes the approach of doing the cuts all in the same direction at the same time. And what that does is it establishes sort of a uniformity to what's going on, especially with letter work. So what I'll do is I'll come in here and I'm just making all these vertical cuts. I'm also wiggling the tool. Pearl is very slippery, it's crunchy and breaks easily, so wiggling the tool helps it pass through it cleanly and evenly and without slipping. It's basically kind of setting the points on either side. So once I have the verticals, I come down and do the horizontals. It helps it pass through it. It's kind of like fingernails on the blackboard, isn't it? It's not a very pleasant sound. Oops, reduce some of that. And then this is called a shading tool or a liner tool. There are two different ones here. I don't know if you can see that, but there's little tiny teeth on these things. And they're used for shading, for putting very fine parallel lines into. And I generally use it as a shadow, drop shadow for these letters. And what I'm doing is I'm setting the tool, and as I move it through the material, I'm turning it down and back up, and it makes the line wide and then narrow. So I'll do the same thing with this big tool. I don't know how much you can see that, but this just kind of accents for the banner. This is a shadow. There's another shadow. Another shadow. You can tell I've done this before. That's about it. What else I've got to do? That's it. And then I use a permanent ink to put the black stuff in there. Very light sanding. Oops, missed some. Get in there. There we go. Correction there. There we go. This is a slightly different tool. It's a little wider version of a chisel style tool, and it's used for these deeper accent cuts. I learned to engrave when I was working at Greven's, making copies of old Vega banjos, which were highly engraved and just amazingly ornate. George would say, "I need a copy of this," and I'd say, "How do you do that?" And he'd say, "I don't know, you figure it out." There you go. Thank you. I also do the Tortoise, Tortis. I've been doing that since the mid-90s. I was driving through the cornfields of Indiana, bored to tears, and I suddenly occurred to me that I'd used a material that I could possibly add color to and make pickguards. So I spent about 3 years developing this product. And I set up a company in Bloomington, Indiana to do the bulk of the casting, but I still do some of the custom stuff like these inlaid guards. And this is one I did for Martin. It's their Roy Rogers anniversary guitar. Made about 100 of these for them. This was a custom little rose pattern. But inlay on this is extremely simple. It's very, very easy to do. This is also sort of a faux real tortoise look versus the more vintage celluloid look. And this is Firestripe. Gibson in the 30s had a bunch of, all their guitars had basically these Firestripe pickguards running in different directions. I think I'm about the only person that's able to kind of replicate that stuff. And I also do all kinds of reproductions of vintage pickguards. When celluloid gets old, it falls apart. So I can actually take either a picture of that guard or what's left of the guard and recreate the entire thing just like the original. So it's been I think of it really as a service to the industry. It's not really a money maker because it's fairly time consuming, but it's fun. I just enjoy the process. It's very creative. So. And it's different from guitar making. It's just enough different to give me a little break from woodworking. But it also gives me the opportunity to have a pickguard perfect for the guitar. I can make exactly what I'm looking for that particular instrument, and I don't have to worry about going and ordering a big sheet of stuff or trying to find another source for it. It's just right here. So that's kind of one of my little asides. Okay, I'm basically mixing up the resins that form the tortoise material. It's currently clear, and I'm adding just a tiny amount of tint to this. Yes, there's more. There we go. That gives it kind of a yellow. And in this case, I'm doing a natural tortoiseshell. A natural tortoiseshell has a very slight haze to it, so I need to add just a little bit of opaquing agent. Now you can see that it's kind of slightly hazy. And butter the mold. It's like making a sandwich. Bring the material all the way to the edge. Then I add the second color, which is a dark. And in this case, I'm trying for a particular pattern in the tortoiseshell. Real tortoise grows radially. The plates grow radially, which means that the patterns spread out like the fingers of a hand. So that's kind of what I try for here. And try and make it look as natural as possible. This is really where the art of all this stuff is knowing the material and what it can do, and the look you want to get when it's all done, because it moves around a lot in the curing process. But real tortoiseshell doesn't look anything like most celluloid. A lot of what I do with this material is make copies of old celluloids, so it's unusual to have somebody ask for real tortoiseshell. And you kind of play with it. See, well, I need a little bit more here, a little more there. And the last step, that's the scary part, is to degas it, which takes all the air bubbles out of it. Check it for dust specks. And that's it. I just close it in. You want to get a shot, a close-up shot? This is my own personal guitar. After almost 47 years, I finally built my guitar. This is a Brazilian rosewood. Some really amazing Brazilian rosewood. This is the cedar neck with the two-piece neck joint, the bird's beak neck. Very light. Has a Lutz top with Adirondack bracing. Nice big voice, very powerful. It has this is the pyramid bridge. That's the other bridge that I do. And basically it's designed and built after the early 30s Martin triple O. It's a short scale triple O. Very lightly built, very lightly braced, scalloped Adirondack bracing. Designed to be played hard or lightly, and just, I mean, you can really push it, or you can lay back and it's got a nice full, fat, warm sound. That's the 14 fret. This is the 12 sister guitar, the 12 fret triple O. This happens to be in some wild walnut, some burl walnut. Too much reflection there. There you go. And it's got a walnut neck with the carving. And of course it's got, this is a white lady, so it's very fancy, and it has the fancy headstock and fingerboard. And it's all solid pearl. I don't use any fake stuff. And it's hand engraved. The engraving, especially on the fingerboard inlays, makes the very plain block inlays look very three-dimensional. And this is 12 fret, so it's the wood combination the customer ordered. He wanted a very warm guitar, so that's why we chose the combination of the Engelmann top and the walnut back and sides. And it gives a very nice sort of fat, warm quality. It's not like mahogany. The problem for me is the 12 frets. I sometimes want to play up here, and I miss them. The other guitar, let's see. This is a triple O, short scale triple O with a cutaway, and it also has the cedar neck, although it's not a two-piece. This is the one-piece neck. And this is Madagascar rosewood. Also with the Lutz top. And I hear the difference between the Brazilian and the Madagascar. I mean, this is good, but this is a little more interesting. This also has the wood bindings. I don't know if you can. The curly maple bindings, which is kind of a nice touch, despite the grunge. And then the other thing I do a lot of is sort of Gibson-y kind of guitars. This happens to be a J35, which is the mahogany version of their early 30s jumbo. It has a brightness to it that's characteristic of mahogany. And it's got a big powerful voice. You can flat pick it or finger pick it. Has the Fire Strike Tortoise pickguard. And it's pretty much like the originals. It has the same Gibson style bracing, which I showed you before, that kind of knife style bracing. And it just produces a very much more incisive kind of tone quality to it, rather than the rounded Martin style bracing. And the sunbursts I'm using actually a tinted shellac, and they're hand rubbed. They're very much like Gibson used to do them. But I enjoy the challenge of trying to get the old guitar sounds out of a brand new box. And different sounds like Martin or Gibson or Prairie State or whatever it is. Well, that's about it. Anything else? Thank you for stopping by Greven Guitar Company. It's been fun having you. And I hope in the future you'll come back and see me again, see what new stuff I'm working on. And in the meantime, enjoy my guitars, because I certainly enjoy building them for you. Talk to you later.